Ever feel like you're kind of stuck, just going through the motions? I was thinking about this the other day because I totally forgot a friend's birthday. I had it written down and everything, but just completely blanked. And it got me thinking about how we often miss what's right in front of us. It's like that David Foster Wallace speech, the one with the fish. The two young fish are swimming along and they run into an older fish. And the older fish is like, "Morning, boys. How's the water?"
Yeah.
And the young fish are totally confused. They're like, "What the heck is water?" Simple question, right? But it makes you think about how we can be totally oblivious to the most important things, the stuff that's all around us, because we're so caught up in our own little world. So that's what this deep dive is all about, really. It's about this idea of everyday courage. We're taking a look at Mel Robbins' book, The 5-Second Rule. Yeah, that 5-second rule, the one you might use to drag yourself out of bed. But it's about way more than that, right? It's a technique that Mel, who was actually a lawyer before all this, figured out to help herself feel less stuck. And it's helped a ton of people make real changes. Her story is so relatable. She was in debt. Her marriage was struggling. She just felt like a total failure. And one night, she's watching TV, and there's this commercial for a rocket launch with a countdown to everything. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it just hits her. She needs to launch herself out of bed, just like that rocket. Now, I know it sounds kind of silly, right? Launching yourself out of bed. But for Mel, it was huge. It wasn't about finding motivation, because let's face it, motivation comes and goes. It was about stopping those negative thoughts before they could, take over. And here's the thing. There's actual science behind this. Our brains are wired to take action when we're near things that are related to our goals. Think about it. Have you ever walked into a bookstore and suddenly wanted to buy every book? Or walked by a gym and thought, "Man, I should really work out"? That's your brain getting ready to act. So with Mel and the rocket, it wasn't just random. It was her subconscious, giving her a little nudge, like a signal to break free. And that's what the 5-second rule is all about. It's a simple tool, but it's powerful. It helps you switch from autopilot to actually doing something. Mel says the 5-second rule is this. When you feel yourself hesitating or procrastinating or talking yourself out of something, count down from 5 to 1. And then just do the thing you've been putting off. It's like hitting a reset button in your brain. That countdown stops the negative thoughts and gets your prefrontal cortex working. That's the part of your brain that helps you make decisions and focus. And this is important because willpower is kind of limited. We only have so much of it each day. So the 5-second rule helps us get around that by making decisions before our brains have a chance to chicken out. So it's not about feeling motivated. It's just about doing. Now, this rule isn't just about getting out of bed in the morning, although honestly, I've used it for that too. It's about all those times when you feel that resistance, that voice telling you to stay comfortable, like avoiding a tough conversation at work or putting off a project you're dreading. We've all been there, right? But the 5-second rule gives you a way to break through that. It's that little push you need to get started. One of my favorite examples from the book is about Mel's husband, Chris. He wanted to open restaurants. It was his dream. But he had a lot of setbacks, closures, money problems, all that. He was starting to see himself as a failure. But by using the 5-second rule, he learned to see things differently. Instead of focusing on what went wrong, he started focusing on what he did achieve. Like he built a brand, he created jobs, he learned a lot. It wasn't the outcome he planned for, but it was still progress. And that change in perspective, it made all the difference. It let him move forward. So that's what's so powerful about this rule. It's not about ignoring your feelings. It's about choosing to act anyway. Because sometimes the bravest thing you could do is take that first step, even if it's scary, even if you don't know where to lead. Speaking Barito acts, let's talk about Rosa Parks, the woman who refused to give up her seat on the bus. Mel actually makes a really interesting point about her. She says that Rosa Parks' decision to stay seated was basically a 5-second decision. In an interview, Rosa Parks even said she wasn't planning to do what she did that night. It just happened, She was tired after a long day, and she knew she had the right to keep her seat. She didn't overthink it. She just listened to her gut. And in that split second, she made a choice that started a movement. And here's something even crazier. Just a few days after Rosa Parks was arrested, the Montgomery Improvement Association was formed. And a young preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. was chosen to lead the bus boycott. Later, Dr. King would say that he didn't even have time to think about it before he accepted. Another 5-second decision that changed history. These examples show us that courage isn't just for, like, superheroes. It's something we can all have, you know. And it starts with those little everyday choices. A lot of times, the bravest things come from just listening to your gut and acting before fear can take over. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about when fear is really overwhelming, like a life or death situation? Well, Mel tells a story about her own dad that shows how even then the 5-second rule can help. Her dad needed brain surgery, and obviously Mel was terrified. But before she went to see him at the hospital, she pushed past her fear and asked him a question. She asked, "Dad, are you scared?" And there was this long pause. And Mel thought maybe she shouldn't have asked. But then her dad said something totally unexpected. He said, "I'm not scared. I'm nervous, but I trust my surgeon." Yeah. And then he said, "You know, Mel, I actually feel lucky." He said he felt lucky to have the chance to fix the aneurysm before it was too late. He said he had no regrets. He'd become a doctor, had a great family, and had a good life. And that's when Mel realized that the 5-second rule isn't just about being successful. It's about really living your life no matter what. It's about pushing past self-doubt and taking the chances you have. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, okay, but my fears are just too big. I don't feel happy. I get it. We all have those things that make us want to hide. But what if this role could help us overcome even our biggest fears and anxieties? Let's talk more about that next time. So one fear that Mel really struggled with, and I think a lot of us can relate to this, is fear of flying. Like serious anxiety at 30,000 feet. Mel used to have all these little rituals to try and calm down. Like she'd scan the boarding area for people who looked like they had good karma. You know, she figured if there were babies or grandmas on board, God wouldn't let the plane crash. But once she was actually in the air, every little bump or sound would freak her out. Takeoff was the worst. She'd just close her eyes and hold on tight until the seatbelt sign went off. Anyone else feel that way? Eventually, Mel realized her fear wasn't really rational. You know, it was just her mind making up all these worst-case scenarios and trapping her in this cycle of anxiety. So she started using the 5-second rule to stop those thoughts. Here's what she'd do. Whatever those scary thoughts came up, she'd count backwards from 5. But while she was counting, she'd force herself to think about the good parts of her trip. Like if she was flying to, say, Chicago for a speaking event, she'd picture herself giving her talk, connecting with the audience, maybe even grabbing some amazing deep dish pizza afterwards. By focusing on those positive images, she was basically reminding her brain that if she's in Chicago enjoying pizza, the plane obviously made it. It's a simple trick, but it works. It gives her mind that context it needs to calm down. And it reminds her that she's stronger than her fears. And the best part is you can use this for any kind of fear or anxiety. Got a big presentation coming up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Picture yourself totally nailing it, feeling that rush of accomplishment. Have to have a tough conversation. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Visualize yourself speaking clearly, setting boundaries, feeling empowered. The key is to use that countdown to interrupt the negative thoughts and replace them with something positive and powerful. You're training your brain to focus on what you want to happen instead of what you're afraid of. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this just a quick fix, like a Band-Aid for bigger problems? But Mel's research says it's way more than that. It's actually a tool for changing your brain and building real confidence. Remember how we talked about the 5-second rule, activating the prefrontal cortex? The decision-making part of your brain. Well, every time you use the rule, you're making that part of your brain stronger. You're becoming more decisive, more action-oriented, more courageous. And as you start taking more actions, even small ones, you start seeing yourself succeed. You see that you can push past your fears. You can achieve things, and that boosts your confidence even more. It's like a positive feedback loop. The more you use the rule, the more confident you become. And the more likely you are to keep using it to tackle bigger and bigger challenges. But there's another piece to this confidence puzzle that Mel talks about. It's surprisingly simple. Talk to strangers. Yeah, I know it sounds terrifying, but how many times have you seen someone interesting, maybe at a coffee shop or a conference, and thought about going up to them, but then talked yourself out of it? I know I've done that a million times. But Mel challenges her readers to do this. Introduce yourself to 3 strangers every day using the 5-second rule. The moment you feel that little spark of interest, that's your cue. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go talk to them. No overthinking, no excuses, just action. Now, this might sound especially scary if you're introverted, and I definitely am, but Mel's point is that this simple act of pushing past your comfort zone can really boost your confidence. Because each time you approach someone new, you're proving to yourself that you're not afraid to take social risks. You're not letting fear control you. And as you have more positive interactions, you start to see yourself as more capable, more interesting, more confident. And really, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe they don't want to talk. Fine, you move on. But what if they do? You can make a new friend, learn something new, maybe even find new opportunities. The more you practice this social courage, the easier it gets. It's like working at a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So even if the thought of talking to strangers makes you want to hide, remember, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go for it. You might be surprised how good it feels to push past that discomfort and connect with someone. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about something I think we all struggle with. Passion. You know, when something really interests you, you get excited about an idea, but then the doubt creeps in. Is this a stupid idea? Am I wasting my time? What if I fail? I've been there so many times. I remember once I had this idea for a screenplay. It felt so original, so exciting. But then the self-doubt monster showed up. Who am I to write a screenplay? I don't even know where to start. Boy. But Mel says the key to unlocking our passions is to start exploring them, even if it feels scary or uncertain. And guess what? The 5-second rule can help with that too. She says to follow your curiosity, to notice what really fascinates you. What are you always reading about? What makes you lose track of time? What are you secretly envious of others for? These are all clues to what your heart really cares about. And once you've found something that sparks your interest, it's time to take action. Don't wait for the perfect moment or for everything to be just right. Just start exploring. Take a class, read a book, talk to someone who's already doing what you're interested in. And when those doubts start coming up, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough time, what if I fail? Remember, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and take that next step. Because here's the amazing thing about following your passions. It often leads you down paths you never expected. A simple class can turn into a new skill. A conversation can spark a collaboration. A small act of courage can open doors to a whole new world of possibilities. Mel tells this great story about a woman named Jo. She was working as a banker in London. Jo had always loved interior design, but she never really thought about doing it as a job. She had a good job, a comfortable life, and she didn't want to change things up. But then she started using the 5-second rule to push herself. First, she signed up for an evening class in interior design. Just one class. But that class totally sparked something in her. She started reading all these design books, trying out different styles in her own home, and eventually she decided to go for it and enroll in a full-time design program. It wasn't easy juggling school with work and family, but she kept using the 5-second rule to quiet those negative thoughts and keep moving forward. And it totally paid off. She graduated with honors, got a job at a top design firm, and now she's living her dream. And that's the message I really want you to hear. It's never too late to chase your passions. You're never too old, never too inexperienced, never too stuck to change direction. It's about listening to that inner voice, that spark of excitement, and trusting that it's leading you somewhere good. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, okay, but what about those passions that feel completely impossible? Like, what if I want to be a musician, but I can't even play an instrument? And that's a fair question. I mean, some dreams can feel so big, so overwhelming, that we don't even know where to start. But Mel says that even those seemingly impossible dreams can happen one 5-second decision at a time. She reminds us that Ed Sheeran, the Grammy-winning musician, was discovered playing his songs in a park in England. No fancy stage, no record deal, just a guy and his guitar sharing his music. And the creators of Broad City, the hilarious web series, they started by filming little comedy sketches on an iPhone and posting them on YouTube. The point is, sometimes the biggest thing stopping us from achieving our dreams is just the courage to begin. And the 5-second rule can help us find that courage. It's about taking those first small steps, even if they feel awkward or insignificant, because you never know where they might lead. Like Mel says, the difference between people who make their dreams come true and those of us who don't is just one thing: the courage to start and the discipline to keep going. And the 5-second rule can help us with both. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to talk about one more thing about the 5-second rule. Something I think is really powerful. Its ability to make our relationships better. Because let's be real, relationships can be tough. They need vulnerability, communication, and a lot of courage. But the rewards can be amazing. So how can we use the 5-second rule to build deeper, more meaningful connections with the people we care about? Well, Mel suggests something that might sound a little weird. Plan your quitting time. So, Mel suggests something that might sound a little weird: planning your quitting time. I know, it's like, what? But seriously, think about it. How often do we get so caught up in work, to-do lists and all that, and it just bleeds into our personal time? It's like we're always on, always connected. By setting a clear quitting time each day, it's like we're sending a message to ourselves and everyone else that relationships matter, that we're choosing to step away from work and actually be present with the people we care about. And here's the crazy thing. That deadline actually makes us more productive. It's that Parkinson's law thing, right? Work expands to fill the time we give it. So if we give ourselves a hard stop, we have to focus and get stuff done. And then when quitting time rolls around, no hesitation. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close the laptop, put the phone away, and just be with your loved ones. It might feel weird at first, especially if you're used to working late, but honestly, it's so worth it. Okay, let's talk about those tough conversations, the ones we try to avoid, like bringing up something difficult with your partner or setting a boundary. Those conversations can be scary, but they're so important for a healthy relationship. And you guessed it, the 5-second rule can help us actually start those conversations before they turn into huge problems. Mel tells this story about how she finally had a real talk with her daughter, Kendall. Kendall had this big opportunity, a chance to audition for a Broadway musical, her dream. But she was letting fear get in the way. Mel could see she was struggling, but she didn't want to push. So she waited for the right moment, and then she just asked, "Kendall, what's stopping you from going for this audition?" And Kendall's answer was so real. She said, "What if I don't get it, Mom? What if I'm not as good as I think I am?" It was that fear of failing, of not being good enough, that was holding her back. But instead of just brushing off Kendall's fears, Mel acknowledged them. She said, "You know what, honey? You might not get the part, and that's okay. The important thing is that you try. You put yourself out there." Because the worst feeling is looking back and wondering, what if? And that's what I really wanted to leave you with today. Don't let fear stop you from living a life that's true to you. Don't let those 5-second windows pass you by. Because in those 5 seconds, you have a choice to hit snooze or to launch yourself out of bed, a choice to stay quiet or to speak your truth, a choice to play it safe or to go for your dreams. So what are you going to choose? Think about it. What's one thing you've been putting off because it just felt too hard or too scary? I challenge you, use the 5-second rule today, not tomorrow, right now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.